The explosive decline of the landlord and property investor and rent control. We're going to talk about it all today. Stay tuned.
Good morning.
Good morning, handsome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Guess what we're looking at?
It looks like a chart there that's going up in the up direction. What does it say? Trend of Australian property investors selling investment properties. Wow.
Triple the amount of landlords are selling today than they were 15 years ago. And the life of a landlord every single year gets harder and harder and harder and harder. Not one piece of relief for a landlord. Plenty of instruments have come through for the tenant. And now we're talking rent control.
Yeah, wow. Big, it's a big topic at the moment as well. Considering the government policy or regulation places limits on how much properties can increase their rent or residential properties. So, very big, very big instrumental, important part of the whole process, isn't it, Mark?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, if you're a landlord at the moment, just to piss you off a little bit more, the thresholds for land tax have now been frozen as voted in Parliament 90 days ago. So what's actually happened is a landlord can have a property, and generally, if it's a unit, it'll sit under the threshold. And if it's a house, it's generally is over the threshold. So you're due to pay land tax.
Yeah.
But the saving grace is the threshold was indexed. So, that threshold was like 850K 4 years ago. Then it went up to like 900K. Then it went up to 950K million. And now 1,050K. So what happens is that threshold kept moving. So, which it should, because property values are obviously going up as well.
Yeah.
It's relative. But our friends in government have now frozen that threshold at 1,050,000, which, just to give you an idea how that translates, when they introduced stamp duty used to be on the highest bracket paid for the wealthy and the lowest bracket paid for entry level into the market. So you're sort of paying a lot of percentage if you're in that higher price range, and you won't pay much stamp duty if you're in the lower price range. But when they brought it in, they brought it in without indexing. So what actually happened was those figures froze, and now every single Australian now pays the highest percentile in those brackets for stamp duty, and they've just done the same thing with land tax.
It's crazy, isn't it, to think that it's so one-sided. I thought they were supposed to be making it easier for people to own property, Mark.
Absolutely. Josh, I've got to say, and for people who don't know out there, if you kill the farmer, they will stop producing crops. And our friends in government feel like they've got to help the developers, and they've got to introduce, the Minns government thinks they need to introduce more stock to the market. Whereas if they're not going to induce property investors into our property market, they will kill the property investor category. They have successfully killed it in the last 20 years, when you look at the amount of stock that's left the market for investors,
Exactly.
and they're not regenerating that stock back into the market. So if I love to call the landlords farmers producing crops for us to eat, which is properties, and I think it's a clear example. If you look at how adverse, how these guys have been smashed, the government decided to charge a landlord. Well, they thought it'd be a good idea for landlords to pay 0.5% more in their interest rate above an owner occupied rate. So they penalise the landlord with interest rates. They penalise the government decided to tell landlords that their rent can only go up once a year. If you look at studies across the world, when you paralyse the investor market, it actually has an adverse effect for homelessness and stuff like that.
Mm, definitely. Yeah, no, it's quite a big topic, and you sort of you don't really see much balance there in the current climate for the landlord. It seems as though just that vice continues to tighten its grip. Yeah, which is just something you don't want to see. I think you'd probably want your mum and dad and your investors in a local sense, as opposed to these developers getting these opportunities. You'd rather see it split amongst the community of people that are working hard and have bothered to skip out on that trip on a couple of years and place that deposit on that extra property.
Oh yeah, look, absolutely. And what happened was, just to see if there's any comments in there. What happened was we took a bunch of landlords' cash away from them, and we called it super. So it ended up going into the equities market, so stock market and things like that. So when the government introduced super in 1992, they said, "Look, it's only 3%." That's now 11. Um,
Yeah,
so basically,
and I
what
believe,
happened
yeah.
was, you believe? What do you
Yeah, I
believe?
believe. Yeah, yeah, no, I believe something to do with, say, super. We account for 0.4 of the population in the world, but we're, I think, either second or third in regards to, that savings pool, which they're referring to as super. We're top of the world per capita. So if you take some of those stats in, and that was based on the old 9.5, so they continue to up it here. I mean, to what sort of advantage or success does that bring us? I get the whole idea of super, but is there other ways that they could make it, have a better effect on what it's for, rather than continue to just up a limit, up a limit?
Yeah, well, the mum and dad investors used to control their money, and they used to buy themselves an investment property. They held it for 5, 10, 20, 25 years. The mum and dad investors don't have that spare cash when 11%'s being sliced off. And furthermore, it's not enough to buy an investment property. Only up until now, it's becoming possible because it's getting fat enough. But to give you an idea, our superannuation and how big it is $3.5 trillion. It's bigger than the ASX stock market. People don't know where to invest the money institutionally because there's so much there. But again, it goes back to my point of killing the landlord and killing the investor. These guys must plant seeds. They must grow crops. They're farmers. These investors are farmers. And if they're not planting, if it's going to be harder for the farmer and harder for the farmer every single year, and another thing happens where they can't do this, and another law comes in when they can't do that, and another thing comes in, they're just going to go, you know what, I don't want to be in the market. And just
Definitely.
the plain talk of negative gearing being removed is enough to turn people off. So the problem is, politically, whoever comes in pro landlord, So any politician, there's been one politician in the last 25 years that's come in pro landlord. They didn't last long.
Yeah. No, it seems to be that be the kicking trend, doesn't it?
Yep. And then now, and also rent control, guys. If you don't know what that is, I'll give you. I looked it up to see if I could get a really good summary of it, and actually I did. And this is what it sounds like. So you can only put the rent up when the tenant leaves. I don't know why I'd buy a rental property if that's the case.
Well, you wouldn't want to keep your tenants around, which means more people are moving, and you know, it just becomes a revolving door of mess, really. Because if you're telling them the only way that expenses continue to increase as life goes on, but they can only increase to cover these costs by kicking tenants out and getting new ones in. Does that sound like a good plan to you, Mark?
What if you can't get rid of them?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're sort of stuck, or if you can, you know what I mean. You're not really serving the true
What about
purpose. It's
the type of rent control that you can't remove a tenant?
quite bizarre that you own the property and you have no rights. Or the tenant
Bizarre
has
is a
more than you.
great word. For
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre is a great word because and then countries that have introduced rent control. Um, there's a great article. You'll see a lady wearing pink on my Instagram, talking about, I think it was the Argentinian market when they introduced rent control. Then they got rid of rent control and the effects that it had. It was so rent control was just an awful thing. But I do have to say, I was sitting doing a talk a couple of months ago, and I think I counted 17 blows to the landlord in the last 15 years, where there were political changes made against landlords. Um, and then the trend is that less and less landlords have continued to own property. They've sold them, and less have continued to buy. They're not buying them. So, and that crossover effect where that happened, where a lot more people sold than when they was about 16 years ago.
Mm,
So, heads up, heads up.
definitely.
What's Lisa got to say?
Very true. Everyone's a loser with this. Tenants won't come out unscathed. Rents will skyrocket.
Yep. And we don't want that either. We don't want that
No,
either. So, because that's basically, as more and more landlords exit, those rents will go higher and higher. So, yeah, it's a big long list. But anyway, that's landlords. That's the rental market. That's the potential talk of getting rid of negative gearing or something like rent control. Not good.
no, definitely not.
Have a lovely day, sir.
You too, mate, and to everyone else.
See
Have a
ya.
lovely day.
See ya, Ryan. See ya. Go the Penrith
Bye.
Panthers.